Hi guys! So for today's video is how to set up Radius and MikroTik in Windows Server for the admin and client tutorial. The Windows Server 2008 R2 setup should start. Follow the on-screen instructions. Choose language, time, and keyboard input. Then click Next. Install now and the setup is now starting. Select the Enterprise operating system. Next is read the terms, then accept the terms and next. Choose Custom Install. Allocate your desired partition, then next. And that's all for the installation of Windows Server 2008 R2. Then that will restart a couple of times. After the restart, let's check first our guide in setting up the server. I'm going to put a check mark on the number 1 guide, which is to install, and for the second, adding a password for the administrator account. Let's set up the initial configurations. Click OK, then enter a password admin123. For the administrator account, confirm, then proceed. The password has been changed. Click OK. Next, let's check the guide and put a check mark on number 2. Now, we proceed to configure the networking. After the creation of password for the administrator, there is initial configuration task. Every restart and on the initial configuration task, there's a guide or a shortcut to configure the networking. Click that, then right-click the local area connection, then go to the properties. Choose the IPv4 and properties. For the IP, we'll use a static IP address, so we manually configure the IP addressing. For the IP address is 192.168, 10.2, then press tab for auto Subnetmask. The gateway is 192.168, 10.1, and for the DNs is 192.168, 10.2. Same as the IP address, then click OK. Next up is let's provide or let's change the computer name. But before that, let us put a check mark for the number 3 for configuring the network. For the number 4, let's change the name of the computer to WinServer on the same initial configuration task. Click on the Provide Computer Name and Domain. Click on Change. Change the computer name to WinServer, then click OK. After that, it will prompt you to restart to apply the changes in the computer. Then click Restart Now. Now that we have configured the network and the computer name, we may now proceed to adding some roles needed in our setup. Let's put a check mark on the number 4 while waiting. After configuring the network and the name of the computer, let's check if our configurations is really working. We need to check the local area network if it has the IP addresses we inputted. Click that, then Details. As we can see, it works. And for the name, we have the WinServer as the computer name. And now, let's proceed in the adding of roles. In the adding of roles, we can have the server manager. And here is the interface of it. We can add roles here and also in the initial configuration task. So let's add Active Directory Domain Services or ADDS. Check, then add features as needed. Then click Next, Next, and Next. Then install. After the installation of ADDS, we check again our server manager, click on the ADD, then run the dcpromo.exe. So, click Next, then create new for us named csu.ciCSlab.com. Then next, for the version we choose, it is 2008 R2. Then now we have the options to install the DNS, and before that, let's put a check mark on the ADDs. Then proceed to the installation of DNS. Let's just click Next and Next, then add the DSRM password, which is admin. rest4 confirm password, then Next and review. And next to install. And check the reboot after the completion so that it apply after the configuration. And while waiting, let's put a check mark on the DNS. After the restart, we may now proceed to adding the DHCP role. As usual, after opening the Windows server, it will pop up the initial configuration tasks. But then again, we can also add roles in the server manager. And now, let's click Add Roles. Next, find the DHCP. Put a check mark, then Next. As you can see, we already have the IPv4 address, which is 192.168.10.2. We may now proceed to click Next, and we can change the preferred DNS to what we have, which is the same IP address of the server as our DNS, and validate, then Next. And Next. For this, we need to add a DHCP scope. Let's add CICS ComLab is our scope name, and the our starting IP is 192.168.10.20, and our ending IP is 192.168.10.80. So we can have 60 devices they can connect to, and please remember, this is our only preferences. You can add more as you want. And click then Next. Let's disable since we're not using v6. Then Next, and now double check of what we inputted in our DHCP and install. And after the successful installation, let's put a check mark on DHCP on our guide. Next up is the NPS, or our network policy server. Let's then again add roles. Click Next and find the network policy and Next. Proceed to the Next and check the network policy server, then install. And that's it for the adding of roles in the Windows server. Now, let's put a check mark on NPS. Now that we're done with the setup and installation for the WinServer, we may now add its user. So first, go to the Server Manager, expand the roles and expand ADDS. Then go to Active Directory Users and Computer. Expand the forest you have created, which is csu.cic, lab.com, right-click, then New Organizational Unit, named Students. And under the Students out, create a new group named BSIT. Then after that, create a user also with a logon named BSIT underscore the last name. And click Next. And for the password, we have BSIT underscore pass. Then put a check mark for user cannot change password. And password never expires for testing purposes, and click Next then. Then after that, we now add the user to the group. Right-click, add user to a group, and type BSIT. Then check names and also add the user to the domain users. Then press OK, and to check if our user is member of the BSIT group, just double-click the group and got to members, and we will see the user we just added. And now let's put a check mark on number 6. And proceed now to the NPS. We just need to expand that also and right-click on the NPS local, then register it to the Active Directory. Click OK and add your Radius client, which is your MikroTik. Click New and named MikroTik. And the IP or DNS is the one from your MikroTik IP address. Since we didn't configure FIST our MikroTik, and our scope is from 192.168.10.20 to 80, we may now use temporarily the .20 and verify and resolve it. For the shared secret is admin SS. So it's easy to remember, then click OK. And next, let's add a network policy. Just expand the policies under NPS. Then go to Network Policy and New. For the policy name is BSIT. Then next, add Windows Group, then add Group, which is the BSIT group. Then next. And add an EAP, specifically protected EAP. Then OK, and check the encrypted and unencrypted authentication, then next, and finish. And that's it for the adding of user and configuring the NPS. Now that we're done configuring the users and NPS, we may now proceed to the MikroTik HapLite configurations. So first, let's connect to the MikroTik router through WinBox. Open WinBox and connect to the router using the IP address or MAC address of your router. The default username name there is admin without password, then connect. Now that we're connected to the router, we may now change the interface's name to what we desire to be and enable our WAME one. And after that, go to the wireless and set up WLAN 1 to AP-Bridge, and default SID is MikroTik. Then to the general tab, rename WLAN 1 and add AP to the name. Next let's make a bridge named ComLabHS-Bridge. And for the ports, we may add the Ether 3. 4 in the WLAN 1 AP to the bridge we've just created. Next up is the DHCP client. Under the IP, add a client, which is for the Ether 2 LAN. Click Apply, then OK. And after that, we may now have an IP address of 192.168.10.20. And as we can see, we have the .20 on our addresses. Now, let's add an IP address for the bridge. Let's have a 172.16.1.1/24. Since we have the IP address for our ports, let's add a DHCP server. Click DHCP Setup and choose Ether 2 LAN, click Next. Next, and for the addresses to give out, let's have a .80, 1-to-141. For the DNS server, we may add also the 8.8.8.8 or 8.4.4 for Google's DNS. And after that, let's set up also our bridge with the same procedure. After the DHCP client and server, let's proceed now in setting up our hotspot. Under the IP, click on the hotspot, then Hotspot Setup for Ether 2 LAN. Click Next and make sure to check the masquerade network. Then Next, and for the DN's name is csu.cics.lab.h. And for the addresses to MAC, let's limit that to 1 per MAC addresses only. And again for the bridge, it is the same setup, but remove the second hotspot to make it only 1 hotspot for all. Then change the bridge profile and click Apply, then OK. Now for the HSProf1, enable or use radius for that hotspot, and go to the Host tab. As we can see, we have one IP address there. That is our WinServer. Find the MAC address, make binding, then bypassed, and click Apply, then OK. We can see now in the IP Bindings tab the MAC address we bind. We may now proceed to the last step, which is setting up the radius. And under radius, check the hotspot, and for the address is the WinServer IP address, which is 192.168.10.2, and the shared secret is admin s. Now that we're done, let's see first if there is a connection between the MikroTik and WinServer. In the MikroTik part, go to the terminal and ping the IP address of the server. And for the WinServer, open the command prompt and ping the IP address of the MikroTik. Then if it is all good, we may now test the user we have created in the WinServer from the hotspot of MikroTik. Now that is all good, and we have a connection on both, we may now log in the user we have created in the WinServer, specifically in the ADDS part. But first, let's go to the MikroTik, and from the hotspot server profile, let's uncheck first the HTTP chap, since our password is only using the HTTP type of password. And go to our client computer and connect to the hotspot now that we are in the hotspot page. Let's input the username and password of our user. And as we can see, it works. That's all for the radius connection. Here's now our policy. And please note the policy may vary. And this is our only preferences. You can add many policies as you want. For the password and account lockout policy, go to the group policy management, then expand and right-click default domain policy. Then choose Edit. And after that, go to the Windows settings. Next is the security settings. Then go to the account policies. Under account policy, there is the account and password policy. Configure that to your desired policy. The same with the account lockout policy. And for the idle session and daytime restriction timeout policy, just go the NPS. In the WinServer roles, double-click your network policy named BSIT. Then go to the constraints, and we will see there the idle timeout, session timeout, and day and time restriction. Configure to your desired timeout. Just note that for every network policy you will create, they are not on the same constraints or conditions. Every policy means different configurations or to be tailored to that policy. And that's all for the admin tutorial in configuring the radius in MikroTik and Windows Server. To finish all up, here's the client tutorial. For the wired connection, just go to the hotspot page when you're already connected, then just log in the user we created. Then after that, you can see on the hotspot in the MikroTik in the Active tab that the user that is connected can be seen, including some of the policy we created. And for the wireless connection, same procedure. But wireless connect to the hotspot via Wi-Fi of the router. Then go to the hotspot page, then log in the user. And that's it for the client tutorial. Thank you and have a good day.